Brooke, good afternoon. How's it going?
Hey, Conrad, how are you, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain.
Well, I just got back from Italy. So I was in Italy for a couple weeks and just had a freaking blast. It is, I know you had a trip there too. And just what an experience. My first trip there, just the food is incredible, the culture, the people, the history. What I found was so funny was you could literally, like, your new buildings there were built in like the 1600s, it's
Yeah.
1500s. Like, it's crazy. We went to one winery that was back from in Montepulciano. I think they had BC. That's how long they have been storing wine in this wine cellar in old historic Montepulciano. Crazy.
There you go. What day was it when you started to plan your return trip? Like how many days into the trip where you were like, oh, we got to come back? I'm curious.
Yeah, it was pretty quickly. Just because we were there for a long time and we got to experience. I mean, we hit them all, right? We were in Lake Como and Venice and Florence and Rome and Chicotera and, like, all these other, Lake Garda, all these places. But it's like you still, it's like, imagine coming to the U.S. and trying to do it in one trip. You obviously can't do it.
Yeah.
So we decided next time we'll do kind of like Florence and South next time.
There you go. Awesome. Yeah, was an awesome trip. I'm glad you had a good time too. It's all good. Not as tan as I thought you'd be. Maybe you were just more like keeping under the sun, or you were inside doing stuff, too much wine drinking, maybe in a cellar.
Exactly.
All good. Well, awesome, Brooke. I'm curious. So Debbie, we'll intro you in a second, but I'm curious, how'd you originally meet Debbie? Some Maryland connection here, perhaps?
Yeah, so Debbie and I have known each other for a long time. So she's friends with my former business partner at Vantage Resort Realty, and in a weird twist of fate, he ended up buying her company, Eastern Shore Vacation Rentals, and then. But I think I really ended up meeting Debbie first in depth and spending a lot of time. Was probably, like many of our guests. It seems like we were at LiveRes partner conferences. It's amazing the friendships that have flourished and developed from those original OG partner conferences. So Debbie, is that how you remember it? I can't remember.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
What do you think of those? Let's flash back to some of those early LiveRes partner conferences. First off, how many of those did you go to? Do you remember?
3.
Okay.
I did 3. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you go to the one in? I know you were you in Austin? You were in Sun Valley.
Austin, Sun Valley, and Boise.
Okay. Now I can't remember what. So CJ Stam, who is
Actually, no. I think I went to 2 in Vegas too. So that
okay.
I 5. Yeah.
Wow. And then I remember playing beer pong. I remember playing beer pong in Sun Valley. So I don't know if you were at that beer pong table upstairs.
No, I don't do those things.
Well, Debbie, why don't we do this? Give us a little bit of background how you kind of stumbled into the wonderful world of short-term rentals.
Sure. So I grew up here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, which is the Eastern Shore of the Chesapeake Bay. My family moved here when I was in middle school. Lived here, and then after college moved away, and then I came back when it was time to raise my family. My parents and family are here. My family has a real estate business, and so I came back here, and just while the kids were little, was doing some marketing work, and I was sort of noticing that. And now remember, this is like in '01 and '02. And a waterfront house may have taken 2 years to sell. So you would see in the comments things like, vacant show anytime, vacant, nobody's there. So, I'd been noticing that. And my background was in hospitality pre-kids. I worked for a chain of hotels as director of sales. So I had hospitality kind of already baked into my blood, and a little bit of real estate experience. Kind of fast forward, a friend of mine who had just moved to the Eastern Shore to St. Michael's had kind of started fleshing out a vacation rental business. She had a property that she was using as a weekend house, but they decided to make this their full-time home, and had kind of made that decision to rent the St. Michael's property out and move closer to town. So she and I had just had my third baby, and I had him on one hip and a margarita in my other hand. And I was at the pool, and we got to talking about this, and she said, I can't believe how much money I'm getting for this house in St. Michael's that I'm renting out. And I said, I can't believe how many houses are sitting around and no one's even using them. I think we should, and there really wasn't any kind of well-formed vacation rental business here. It's very common in the beach, it's very common in other places, but there wasn't really anything here. So we just kind of that night decided to go for it, and we started out just renting. This is a big weekend community for Washington D.C., Baltimore, even Philadelphia, and even as far as New York, New Jersey. And so we started kind of doing it for our friends, people that we knew that were coming, that were weekenders, and then we kind of branched into listings that weren't selling. And before we knew it, we had 75 houses, and we really
Wow.
kind of hit like an untapped vein and demand to do something like this.
And it wasn't just seasonal, right? I mean, people would come down year round, I imagine, or was it just in the summers, really?
It's I would say it's three seasons. And winter's kind of here, although we would once in a while get some writers and people that really wanted the solitude and weren't looking for as much who would maybe rent for like the season, the winter season to have kind of that quiet getaway. But the fall here is probably very close second to summer here, honestly, with just there's such a change. But the geese, the color, we switch over from crabs to oysters, and there's a lot that fall has. And then even bleeding into the holiday season's pretty great.
Yeah.
And then of course spring, people are just eager to
Yeah.
get on with
Well,
it.
it is. If nobody's ever been to St. Michael's and kind of the eastern shore of Maryland, it's absolutely beautiful. I highly recommend it. I think there was an article written about it, how they called it like the New Hamptons, which I'm sure some of the locals probably didn't like. A lot of DC elite comes out there. I'm sure there was like Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld and all these guys were out there, and it's a cool place, and I've spent a lot of time, so I highly recommend if nobody's been out there to take a visit for sure.
Oh,
So,
good.
Awesome.
well, cool. Well, let's jump in, Conrad.
Okay.
I like it. Let's dive in. So, Debbie, we'll be reading from kind of your top 10 mistakes that you wrote up for the book, and we're going to be kind of just chatting about them. We found that this has kind of been the best format so far to share, kind of expand upon what you wrote about in the book. So we're excited. So number one, let's dive right in: quantity versus quality. So when you were first starting out, you were eager for properties and took virtually anything. Brooke, I feel like we've heard that before. As our business evolved, we developed standards and even turned down properties that we did not perceive being the quality that our guests expected. So what were some of those things that you later ended up turning away or turning down? How did you know if property did or didn't meet your criteria?
I mean, we were kind of eager and excited, and I think maybe a little bit overzealous in terms of and sometimes we were like things that we thought were great, and then we had to learn a little bit about like what people's expectations were of a vacation property, because you kind of tend to be like, oh, the view is amazing, the backyard's great, but so we had to, once we honed in too on what our product was, and that kind of what we wanted to project as a brand, that gave us, we kind of ended up evolving into what is an Eastern Shore Vacations house. And we kind of looked at like some Outer Banks companies and other places where they had this whole, you didn't really know what you were getting. And we really wanted to change that and have a level of consistency. So and to be honest, some of it was tangible and some of it wasn't. I mean, some of it was kind of a gut thing that my partner and I had when we go to a house. Like, does this evoke some kind of experience? Does this give you something that you wouldn't get somewhere else? There could be, for example, there could be, a really cool waterman's cottage that was like a 1920s kind of thing that, maybe didn't feel like a luxury home, but it was an authentic experience, when you're close to the water and you really felt like you were there, versus a really nice house that was newly constructed. It just felt sterile. And so two people making that judgment call might say, well, the other house is way nicer. Why would you turn that down and not the 1920s cottage? And because it's because of the experience and how it makes you feel. So there was that. And then, yeah, I mean, just certain things. We also got a lot more comfortable with telling the homeowners what they needed to do to have the house guest ready. So, you're eager in the beginning and you're like, sure. I mean, I'll call the hose hanging from the tree an outdoor shower. That's fine, but
I've
then,
never heard that one
you
before.
know, but then you have to kind of, but as we moved on, we're just like, that's not an outdoor shower. If you want to advertise an outdoor shower, then we need something that looks like shower. So that was also part of that quantity versus quality thing.
Debbie, I can't tell you like how many of these are like so common. Like, and it's like the one you just mentioned right here. It was probably at least easily a dozen times. So I keep going back to. I'm not going to reiterate this, but it's beat a dead horse here. But if you're starting a new short-term rental company, like buy this damn book. It'll save you so much money because guess what? We've all made the same mistakes, and guess what? You're going to too. So read the book and don't make the mistakes of all these other people that have come before you. We've given you the blueprint, buy the shoot. You don't even have to buy it. Email me, Brooke@Vintory.com. I'll send you a copy. Like, it save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And when you sell for millions of dollars, just remember me in your will,
For sure. I know. It is true. It's true. There's so many things that you could save people the heartache for.
Yeah. And I think often, I guess my take on it too, I'm curious your reaction to this, Brooke, is there's often a legitimate reason at first for you being a little bit more, I don't want to say loose with standards, but like you need cash, right? We need oxygen to survive. We need cash to survive.
And that's the reality. And, my problem was I was so goal focused, and the goal that I would set was just a number. And it was like I had to like grow by 50 properties this year or whatever happened to be, or I had to double every single year. And it was more so the goal than the standards. And then I realized, when it was the proverbial, the dog caught the proverbial bus, and I was like, oh shoot, now what? We have all these dogs. What are we going to do with them? And then I realized there was more headaches downstream. And then realize where you can get set the standards a little bit more. And also, you're right. Like in the early days, like you need revenue, you need money, like you know what I mean. Like you need oxygen. So you are absolutely right. So sometimes you do lower your standards. But you know what? There's been a lot of companies out there that I've seen that have actually done a really good job of really holding true on what they want that brand to be, even in the early days. As hard as it is, when people are sitting there, waiting to sign a contract, it's sometimes hard to say no.
Yeah, I think it's easy. It's always easy to turn down the stuff that's just horrible, right? Like, but it's that one that's like just 2 clicks below. That's the one where you're just like, you grit your teeth a little bit like, maybe I could, maybe I couldn't. So that's the challenging part. Well, the next one, I think, Debbie, in your list here was kind of that's the same sort of thing. What do you do in these situations? So number 2, I'll read it for the benefit of the listener. Refunding guests for valid complaints. It's easy to give money back, but what does that solve other than just kind of getting that person off the phone? You kind of began in your business discouraging refunds or at least offering experiences as an alternative instead. It wasn't just about the money because that necessarily doesn't fix the bad experience, but we can offer to give you additional value. So what was kind of the change that you made here with doing less refunds? Did you do some refunds still? How'd you handle that going forward when issues?
Yeah, I mean, so again, like it was something I just noticed one summer that it seemed to be that our guest services people were just getting really comfortable with hitting that like refund button, AC out for a day, boom, like here you go. And and also getting when we started really when reviews started to become a little more commonplace too, getting those back. And you kind of, even if you solve the problem, it didn't really give them back their vacation, and number one. And I think a lot of times people didn't really, it wasn't even ever really about the money, but that felt like the only thing you can do. This doesn't work, well let's. And so I just started saying to them, guys, if their AC's out for the afternoon, instead of, instead of just being like, we'll give you $200 back and, sorry for the inconvenience, why don't we book them a cruise on one of the boats for the afternoon and get them out on the water and number one, take their mind off of the fact that there was an issue, expose them to something that they wouldn't have otherwise done, and give them a memory or something to remember us by, that's not sitting in their house in the afternoon hot waiting for the AC to get fixed. So once we started doing that, we had it built into our owner contracts. I want to say it was like $300, but we had a limit where we could spend without any authorization a number to remedy a guest problem. And if they were things like that were, oh shoot, the housekeepers forgot the linens, or they were, these kinds of things, which they're displeasing, they're not so much crucial, then then we'll drop off a crab feast in their backyard. Let's take that over to your house, or let's drop a couple kayaks off at your property, or paddle boards or something, or tickets to a festival that's going on, or any of those things, because and we just ended up, instead of the review being something like, well, we had a great time, the AC broke Saturday, they fixed it quickly, it was great, blah. Instead, they don't even mention it. They're like, we had a great time, they sent us on this cruise, or whatever. And so I feel like it's the right thing to do in my mind. Morally, it gives them their vacation back a little bit. And then it was also just a way to kind of turn it around and not just be giving money back for every little thing. So now, obviously, if something really big happened, like, they had a house with a pool and the pool, now that's a whole different matter. I mean, there are certain times when a refund's just the only way to go. But, there's always little things like that. And I just think that it went a much longer, got a lot more mileage out of that.
Yeah. I love this so much, Debbie. I mean, what a great idea. Because, I mean, you're right. It's so easy sometimes just to give a refund. But what does that actually do? Is that actually solving the underlying problem? Is that turning a negative into a positive? And you've said it. I mean, 6 years from now, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, whatever it is, they're not going to remember the $200 refund you gave them. But they might remember that sunset cruise. They might remember that, the kayak tours. They might remember the crab feast. Those are the memories that they, so now it's much better than this, but it's almost like when a meal gets screwed up, they bring out a really great dessert, or they give you a free bottle of champagne or something like that. But I think this is actually much better than that, because now you are making those memories and the experiences. And when it's all said and done, guess what? That's what it's all about. These vacations with families is all about making the memories. And if you can help partake in that, and now, like, you've turned that negative into a definite positive and a memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that was a program that once we instituted it, worked really well for us.
Yeah, I've told this story before, Debbie, but we went somewhere, my wife and I, last year for a concert, and there was hotels were all sold out. There was really no traditional vacation rentals in this area, so we had to go on Airbnb, which is kind of our last resort, but we will do it. And we booked a Airbnb. I'm putting this in air quotes for the listener. We booked an Airbnb, and long story short, on our checkout day, they were actually tiling the roof, which they did let us know, hey, someone's going to come off the day before and drop off tiles. We're then going to be putting tiles on the roof after your stay. So if you see someone dropping something off, that's what that is. And I was like, okay, that's fine. That makes sense. Long story short, they showed up 6 a.m. the day we're supposed to depart. So we didn't have to check out till like 11 a.m. They're at 6 a.m. ripping tiles off the roof, waking up my, baby who's like trying to sleep in the room next door to us. And it was like just a horrible thing. Long story short, I said, hey, I'm not going to leave you a negative review. I'm in the industry. I'm not going to take you down in this way. That's not my style. But that wasn't cool. That was not a good experience for me as a guest. I still left a 5-star review on Airbnb, but I was in the private comments. I let them know, and they started refunding me. So I didn't even ask for the refund, Debbie, and yet they offered it to me, which I thought was a way to kind of soothe my maybe anger, or I'm not even anger, but just that was a bad way to end that stay. That was overall good before that. And I just wonder that host that had like a 4.99 rating, I'm like, I feel like you might do that a lot. You just people complain, you just start refunding. So when you were saying that earlier, where your
Right.
team was very comfortable hitting that refund button, I think there's hosts that
Hmm.
do that today on Airbnb. And what you described would have been far better than what ended up happening to us, which was just like a headache and a crying baby at 6:04 a.m. in the morning, which was not the best feeling,
Yeah.
to be honest. Awesome.
It's
Well, we'll go to number 3, talking about properties and I guess the people that are necessary to work on their properties. This is a pretty short one, but maybe you could expand on it a little bit here. Not hiring
mhm.
property inspectors soon enough. So when you started the business in '04, the industry buzz was to save money and let the guest inspect. I'm gonna be honest, Debbie, I've never heard that phrase before. Maybe because I entered in 2014, not in 2004. But could you walk me through
Well,
what you meant by property inspectors?
Debbie's dating herself here by letting the guest inspect. Yeah, when that was
I
like a
know.
Letting the
common
guest
thing. Yeah.
inspect.
But Brooke, I mean, you remember, and I'm trying to remember. George there was a consultant.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Beer
so
back.
yeah, so so of course, eager to get things going, we went to a and it was, I think it was a home away conference actually at that time, and one of the speakers there was like, "Don't waste your money on inspectors. It doesn't matter. Let the guest inspect. Who's your best inspector? The guest. So have people on hand to react to and take care of the problems quickly." So we were like, "Oh, well, okay." But the problem for us is that we have a huge geographic area. I mean, we have all these back roads, and this isn't like Ocean City where you have blocks of condos and buildings where you just I mean, I could drive for 45 minutes and not leave the county, like so. And then staffing and all that. So I mean, that was just a terrible approach. And I mean, we had our housekeepers, but then we just were like, oh well, if there's a problem, the guests will tell us and then we'll fix it. Well, so we very quickly changed course. And we were coming at it at the time. My business partner and I each had 3 young sons, and so 6 kids between us. And there was not enough money in the world, to prevent like us from having to take those nasty, mad phone calls in the evening about how they just got to the house and there's no linens or whatever. So we made a quick correction, and we did end up hiring inspectors who came in after housekeeping and double checked everything. And there's a lot of variables with our houses too. So again, they're not just condos. There's the pool decks, docks, or the kayaks, I mean, on and on. And so it was really a mistake not to have inspectors.
Did you have the same person inspect like the same property, so they got to know it a little bit, they understood
Yes.
what it was there? Okay,
Mhm. Yep. Yep.
sure, that helps.
Yeah. And then we even, we started with like a pre-season inspection that was mandatory and that kind of thing too. And that gave that inspector a chance to meet with the homeowner and really understand the house and all that. So.
Yeah. I know we have a client, Brooke, who I believe is a mutual client of both Vintory and what we do on our side of things, who doesn't inspect every property. So it's sort of random. They just don't have enough, bandwidth, and it's pretty spread across geographically. So he's like, I want to, I just can't. But I guess, I don't know if threat's the right word, Debbie, but the possibility that the property may be inspected kind of keeps the housekeepers more in tune. Like, well, I don't know if it's going to get inspected or not, so I better make sure I do it properly, because if not, that inspector is going to come by and check every little detail to make sure it's right. Because some guests, to be fair, are not as picky as others, right? Some are like, okay, but they're not going to leave that 5-star review, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, number 4 then, speaking of cleanliness and properties and things like that, that kind of dives well into that topic. Not taking frivolous guest complaints seriously. You have to remember what is mildly displeasing to one guest, maybe a disaster for another. Treat every problem with the same urgency. So what was kind of the way that you did end up handling guest complaints so that everyone had a good outcome over time?
Yeah. So I think that was definitely a lesson that I both had to learn personally and then really try to convey to my staff, because I get a little bit like oh wow 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 there's bigger problems in the world, like one, like an example would be we are all of our houses are on well here, pretty much. And if a house has been shut down, that water can smell like sulfur, a little bit. It is what it is. I grew up here. Those kinds of things, bugs, blah, blah, none of that stuff I'm used to it. But you have to remember that how like that can be alarming to somebody that isn't used to it, doesn't know what that is. And so trying to set expectations of the area, like another big problem we would have. I mean, this is a big hunting area. Hunting is everywhere, and it's even in there can be neighborhoods that have like a hunting farm next door, and we would get calls on Thanksgiving morning because everybody hunts on Thanksgiving morning. It's a tradition around here, that they heard gunshots. Well, I'm like, well, yeah, of course, it's Thanksgiving. But and then this one guest called me and said, we called the police because we heard gunshots, and they said that it's not only allowed, it's encouraged. So trying to really like, I guess in my way I wrote this kind of like frivolous complaints, but I also just things that I take for granted that I don't realize I could see why somebody from Philadelphia might be upset that they hear gunshots outside there.
Right. In Philly, that's very bad. Yeah. So I kind of get it. Right? Yeah. That feels like a novel one, Brooke. I don't know if we've heard that exact one.
Yeah,
before,
that is.
I think there's a lot of truth to it.
No, 100%. And Debbie, you know what? Like I remember. So obviously, I got 52 of these. Times 10, so 520 mistakes. And I do remember reading your mistakes, Debbie, and I was like, "Oh my God, Debbie is spot on these things. Like they were so good. I mean, you were. And I'm not just saying that, but you wrote some of the best ones and experience shares here. So I really am grateful for you contributing to this book because I think there's a lot of value in what you shared here. So this is one that's definitely at the top of the list.
I don't know, Debbie. Have you ever heard the Angry Boat story? Are you familiar with that one?
No.
Okay, so the premise is basically a customer comes into a store and they start yelling. Let's say it's a high-end fur coat, and they come into the clothing store and they go, "The button fell off this coat." And the shop owner walks in and goes, "That's ridiculous. Hopefully no one saw you in that." And they take it very seriously, and they sort of start screaming, "Who sold you this coat? We're going to bring this back and fix it immediately." And they sort of overreact to the problem a little bit. They make it seem like it's like the end of the world. And then they kind of turn to they go to the back, and of course they fix the problem. And he turns around and goes, "There can only be one person in the angry boat." I think Apple calls it like only one person can grab the angry token. So if you like overreact to the issue, like a gunshot, are you serious? Where are you? Tell me what's happening. And you sort of act like it's a big deal. They actually kind of calm down. They're like, well, it's not that big of a deal. Well, no, let me fix it. So, but if you dismiss it and you're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, and you sort of push it aside, then they actually get more angry. Then they're like, oh, how dare you not listen to me? That sort of thing.
So the idea is to overreact.
Yeah, you kind of overreact a little bit. But then in that moment, most people actually retreat very quickly because they're like, oh, okay, well, it's not that big.
They're like, whoa, that happened.
Somebody's getting fired here. Somebody's getting fired for that.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, well, you don't need to fire anybody. We're like, and you're like, no.
Yeah, it'll all be okay. Yeah, that happened to me once. I was last minute, my husband and I were going away, and I thought, oh, I should get my hair done. So I call, and I was like, I know this is last minute, but there's any way I can get in for a hair appointment? And the girl's like, well, is it an emergency? I'm like, well, no, it's hair. So like, no, it's not. But yeah, like, so then I was I'm like, okay, Debbie, calm down.
What kind of hair emergency?
Like you're getting married that evening, and you need your hair for the wedding. That's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah.
I got my hair caught in a fan.
Yeah. Like it's not an emergency. Just whatever. So.
Just one time. All right. Well, let's go back to kind of the opposite of things then with number 5 then, Debbie. Number 5, everything is fine till it's not. Be sure paperwork, procedures, etc. are always executed and buttoned up, no exceptions ever. So how did you kind of evolve, I guess, like the fun parts of business?
Yeah. So, I mean, all right. So, the Eastern Shore is a small town, and, we had a very, very high repeat guest rate too. So we had a lot of people that came back and ran the same things. And, I started seeing some things slipping through the cracks, they got here late. I didn't have them sign. It's okay. We have your lease from last year, and, we got caught a couple of times, and, it just, again, like everyone's friends and everything's great and everyone's patting each other on the back until they're not. And it makes the situation so much clearer and better for everybody when you have it all signed and buttoned up. And so I kept trying to explain that to our guest services people, like, guys, if you don't get this stuff noted, if like, here's like, for example, this would be a great example. So most of our houses were pet friendly and we allowed up to 2 dogs. We had a guest that was like, well, I have 2 dogs, but I also have this little Shih Tzu tiny dog. Like, he's like a little dog. So he doesn't really count.
Okay.
Guest services says, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Well, and doesn't note it on the lease, doesn't put it anywhere. So there's no documentation. And lo and behold, the neighbor complains, and we're not, so, that they counted 3 dogs there. So then now we've got a problem where we've told the guest it's okay. It's not noted anywhere. The owner didn't give us permission. And we got a real mess on our hands. So, all of those things, I'm like, it's probably okay. It might be okay. But you have got, doesn't matter what they do, go through all the channels. Ask the owner if it's okay. That would have been your first chance to hear that the neighbor is not going to be happy about that. Ask and go that way, but don't just, and yeah, and there were no really bad people, other maybe the neighbor that turned them in, but it just, like you said, you can't make that assumption.
Yeah. So I'm throwing this one out for Justin Ford and Eric Thibodeau. So talk to me about like safety relating to that. Like, did you guys do anything specific for safety? Was that part of the preseason checklist? I mean, for you all, I mean, there's a big liability. I mean, most of your homes are on the water. Most of your homes have pools. Obviously, there's a lot of risk there. You know what I mean? Some of these homes are old, that you're managing. So what did you talk to me about what you did from a safety perspective? And did you let some of those things slip through the cracks in the early days too?
Well, so, part of that is regulations too. And when we first started the business, there weren't that as many regulations as there are now. Now there's a little bit more well-formed safety regulations. The first place we started was insurance for our homeowners because you're right. I mean, you swimming pool, and then you have the river in the background. You have a lot of old houses that have funny, quirky floor plans and pass through bedrooms and windows that are small, and all kinds of weird stuff going on. So they're certainly not that. So that was our first thing, was make sure you're well insured and have the policies that you need to have in place to cover you. And then, it was, we basically made them have the code, fire extinguishers and, the smoke detectors and things like that. But yeah, it was, there's only but so much you can do, particularly since a lot of our houses were old historic homes, and there's not much you can do to, you can't widen the stairs, you can't, do things like that. So we would try to do our best in terms, floor plans were always good to post so people knew kind of how to, recollection of where they go. So.
Which, fun fact, when we would track visitation to our website, floor plans are always the number one most visited page for every property page. It was crazy. People love floor plans.
Yeah.
If mama wants to see where every kid's going to sleep and they're going to be close to them, So highly recommend you put floor plans on your as one of the photos if your software doesn't have a specific spot for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like that one. Awesome. Well, number 6, this one did come up previously, Debbie, so I'm curious your take on it. Actually, I think the type of business you did is exactly the one that I think Brooke will talk about in a second. But anyways, for the benefit of the listener, don't take your eye off your core business. It's natural that you can see other way that you can get reservations, ancillary businesses, etc. But be careful that it doesn't compromise the mothership. I like that phrase. We tried a boat rental business, for example, a lot of time coordinating. Things didn't go that well. Whole business got a black eye, which I imagine might have impacted the guest perception of your brand and your company on the rental side. So what was kind of your experience with that, and how did you later decide to maybe shut that down and focus on the core?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of like I said, the vacation rental business can really start to, we used to joke, this is like a bad weed. It's like growing everywhere, like you're getting like this direction, that direction, and you can't keep it under control. Because we did start some ancillary businesses that were kind of behind the scenes, like trash pickup and housekeeping and linens, and we did those things, but those weren't public facing. So then we had an incident where a guest of ours was staying for a season, and they rented a boat, and something happened with the boat rental place, and they got mad and walked out, and then came into our office and was like, well, we got into a fight with these people, so where else can I rent a boat? And we were like, that was the only place that there is to rent a boat. So my business partner ended up renting them her boat, much to her husband's chagrin.
Did she ask him?
And no, she told him later. And then that kind of launched this idea where we decided. So we bought like 10 boats, and we thought, well, let's try it. Well, it was a disaster. I mean, keeping track of them, and then when the boats break down and people don't know how to use them, and I mean, there was so many moving parts, and I'm like, we're spending so much time dealing with this boat thing and situation, and then things go wrong, and then all they know is that we screwed that up, and so we could have executed all the other things perfectly, the house and what we were supposed to do. And so I was like, we're done, we're out. So we learned that lesson pretty quickly.
Yes, Debbie, this is another one that came up all the time. I mean, I think so. I actually rented. Many don't know this, but Justin Ford owned a company called On the Water in Maine, up in Maine, and I rented from him a couple years in a row, a lake house, and he had a boat rental business. And I mean, I remember when I got there, he is hustling and sweating, and he's literally delivering and launching the boat, putting it on the dock. Then he's got to drive in. Many of his houses are like a couple hours away. So that's what he's literally doing, is spending every like Friday and Saturday is running around delivering boats. And I think his quote, see if I can find it here, from when he contributed to the book as well. He said at one point we had over 30 boat rentals, a baby gear division, and grocery provisioning. We finally realized we could make more income and save time by adding just 2 great property listings. And again, Dustin Abney, with Protoro said, letting yourselves get distracted, shiny object syndrome. As he pointed out, it's imperative to stay true to your niche or focus. If it's not an F yes, it's probably a no. Sacrificing your values and getting distracted will take you down the wrong path. And again, I probably have like 12 other ones that I could say just like this. But again, we all made the mistake. Most entrepreneurs do have that shiny object disease. I certainly do, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we did all those things. The baskets, the first, we'll do packages. Oh, we'll do, I one day I was like, everyone out of the pool, we're not doing it anymore.
one property, right? One new property would have paid for itself.
Right. Exactly. Like, we just need to do the one thing and do it well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I like that then. So kind of back to like the ops and positioning side of things then with number 7, Debbie, not going all inclusive sooner. We realized we were spending way too much fielding complaints about linens and towels, whether the guest actually brought a pet, etc. Once you went all inclusive and just included those things in the price, it went away. This also actually simplified operations because beds were automatically made. And maybe, Debbie, some of the listeners may not know that like that was common in the past in many markets, that there would be no linens included. Maybe you could talk
you
about
brought your
where
own.
that started. Yeah, maybe you could talk about that too when you go through that.
Yeah, I mean, the energy that we were spending on, like, at the end of, with our check-in reports, this house gets linens, this one doesn't, and then doing the orders, and then getting the complaints like this house didn't have linens. They got to the house and, maybe the mattress pad didn't look so great, and then they're calling and screaming at us. There was always like the pet thing too was interesting, because we were always, what would happen is, guest says, house is pet friendly, but guest says they're not bringing a pet. Monday morning, my housekeeper calls and says the house is full of dog hair. I had to spend an extra 2 hours cleaning and get the dog hair out. I call the guest. Guest says, I didn't have a pet with me. And I'm like, okay, this has just been this waste of energy. So we just said, and again, like I said before, the geography of our houses is so spread out that it's not easy I mean, I might have a housekeeper that lives 45 minutes away. And so I have to call them at 8 o'clock at night to go make a bed. That's a big deal and it's a problem. So we, again, I said, you know what, we will, let's just include it all. If it was a pet friendly house, it was charged a pet fee. Whether I didn't ask and I don't want to know, but that was an extra housekeeping charge automatically. Beds were just automatically made, so we didn't have all this running around like, you forgot to make this bed, I didn't get enough linens, three people added linens on Friday, like, and now we got to scramble to get them. And so that, all of that, just by just saying it's all included, it just completely simplified the business.
Yeah, it's funny. Flashbacks to the old days, right? Where that was the way it was in Ocean City too. Like nobody included linens, and not only that, if you ordered linens, they brought them to you and they dropped them off in a black trash bag on your doorstep. you know, we were the first company to actually make the beds. Where people were like, "Brooke, it's not done that way in Ocean City. You don't understand." And I'm like, you wouldn't rent from a Four Seasons or a Ritz Carlton and get your laundry like in a black trash bag when you checked in and had to make your bed. I mean, why would we be doing this? So I'm glad to see the industry's evolved. We were the first company to make all of our rentals. Now it took a couple of years, but we were the first company to make it where every property, same thing. We demanded, wait for this, Wi-Fi. We actually demanded, there were some owners that pushed back on that. And then we also demanded that all properties had the linens in it. But again, that was not normal. That was not the standard at the time.
Yeah.
We've come a long way. I will say personally, Brooke, if I had to choose between linens on the bed or Wi-Fi, I think I'd take the Wi-Fi, honestly. Like I can sleep on, I've slept on worse stuff in college, so I'll be fine.
We did both. We were
Exactly.
advanced at top of the market back then,
I love that. Awesome, Debbie. Well, we're rounding out. We got a few more left, but these have been awesome so far. So let's head over to number 8. Not setting the right expectations. It's natural to want to point out the positives and oversell a property, but that can certainly come back and haunt you. Maybe when the guest arrives, the photography kind of oversold it. Show the ugly house next door, show the bad bedrooms, and anything else, let the guest decide. So what's kind of been, how do we, it's like online dating, Debbie, right? We can't post the picture of ourselves that's, maybe a few pounds ago or something like that. How do we be realistic with the property itself?
Right. I know. And I mean, sometimes I felt like I might have even been too, and it's funny because it's something I've had to readjust myself with being in sales with real estate now, because of course,
Right.
they're going to look at the house before they buy it, but that's not the case in a vacation rental. So, but just that philosophy again, that my business partner and I mean, there was nothing worth taking those terrible phone calls. So, we had one too many of those Friday night, this house isn't what we thought it was, blah, blah, blah. It looked too good on the pictures. So we were, we staged it, we made it look nice, but we also were very honest in our photography about, the things that were around it, things that people would ask about. And we really didn't oversell any of the houses. We definitely felt like, just a tiny bit of under expectations was the better way to go, and then let them be pleasantly surprised versus the opposite. So and that worked better for us in terms of getting those angry, and you get better reviews out of it too. I mean, if people are like, a little overwhelmed, like, wow, this was, you're going to get a better review.
I remember reading this one the first time you submitted this to me, Debbie, and I started laughing. The line, show the ugly house next door, the bad bathrooms with the good ones, and anything else. Let the guests decide. But you're right. Like, here's the reality. They're still going to book the damn house, and they're not going to have the complaints, right? So it doesn't, it's not changing the outcome for the worse. So yeah, the pictures let the pictures do the description. So you're not saying it's a little squirrely, bathroom or the ugly house. And you did have a lot of those, right? I mean, you have multi-million-dollar homes next to old fish shacks, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the Eastern Shore, so you can see all kinds of different things. Yeah.
No. I have a story recently from that, Debbie, where a client that we work with had done that. He had taken a photo of a cabin and cropped it perfectly, 1 pixel on either side, so you couldn't see the cabins were right next to it. So the setting looked like it was a little more private, a little more serene than it actually was. Negative reviews piling in. Bookings were piling in, to be fair, but negative reviews were piling in as well. I walked out on the back deck. I stretched in the morning, and 20 feet to my left, 20 feet to my right was someone else doing the same thing. It's not what I thought it was. 3-star, 4 stars piling in. long story short, he reshoots it, just shows the cabins next door. Bookings went down a little bit, to Brooke's point, but the reviews actually, hey, it was fine. You're in a neighborhood, be aware of it, that sort of thing. But people had the right expectations. That's something that Tyann Marsing talks a lot about. The guest gets unhappy when their expectations are not met. They're not necessarily really unhappy if there's someone next door. It's more that they thought it was private and then it wasn't, and then we're misaligned and then we're having a problem.
Yeah, a little switcheroo.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, number 9 then, maybe software, kind of going down that path for a second. We switched reservation software and moved our office the Friday Memorial Day weekend one year. What were you thinking? I don't recommend, Debbie, I don't mean to Monday morning quarterback you here, but that didn't seem like a great idea. What was the lesson?
I don't know
what were you thinking?
Well, we're insane, number one. But I think what we were thinking was everything's crazy, so everything's crazy. Like we're moving. We already knew we were moving, and then we thought, well, it just makes sense to change the software right before the season rather than wait. We were the kind that were like, we're going to do it, we're just going to do it, and if everything's crazy, let's let. But it was really. It was too much, and so I think really the lesson there is plan things out and don't try to take on too much. When you're especially right at the precipice of the season.
That's a straightforward one, Brooke. I think we can all agree on that one.
I've got no words, Debbie.
I know that was not a smart move.
It's just like when you hear a story. It's like when you hear a story of like what a 19-year-old guy did, a teenager did, and you're like, that was stupid. That was stupid from the beginning. That was stupid in the middle. That was stupid at the end. It just didn't work out that way, but it's all good. We just prevented someone, Debbie, who's listening from doing that. So you did something good by sharing that.
Yes.
Good.
All right, let's round this out here. I know we got a handful of minutes left. We appreciate your time, Debbie. So let's go over to number 10. This was a popular one, actually. Not attending conferences. You can learn from other property managers, even if they have a different product or they are in a different area, that sort of thing. And it helps to have friends in the business. So what was kind of your journey? I mean, you kind of led with it, obviously, how you met Brooke with some of these industry conferences and things like that. But what did you attend during your time?
Yeah, so I mean, at first we just didn't do those things. And a lot of it was just because we're a small town on the Eastern Shore, and we felt like the majority of the vacation rental, participants, and industries and businesses weren't comparable to us. They were beach resorts, they were mountain resorts, things that are, very different in our business. But, then we decided to go to one or two, and it just kind of helped to, the fundamentals of the business are still the same, even if you're in a different area. And it was actually really helpful to talk to other people about, well, how are you handling this, or what kinds of things are you seeing? And, so we kind of made the assumption that we wouldn't get anything out of it, not because we were so smart, but just because we felt like we had such a quirky, unique business model that we wouldn't really have anything in common or to discuss, but we actually did, learn quite a bit. And like I said, it was just, to this day, I still have a ton of friends that I've met at those conferences, and, Brooke being one of them, but it's just like great to have that. It was good to have that camaraderie and know you're not in it alone. And when the industry inevitably zigs and zags, you have somebody to call and talk about it and get some info and insight.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about this every podcast, I think. So we've recorded like 35 of these or whatever it is now. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but this one comes up every single time, Debbie. And, one thing we find too is a lot of times it's not necessarily always the sessions. It's not the keynote. It's most lessons were learned at 10 o'clock over a beer, at the bar. Mm-hmm. That's where most of them were. And then also the friendships that come from that. Like the fact that I think we really, bonded at one of the early Live Res conferences. I met, CJ and so many people at a lot of these conferences that have become good friends now. So it's definitely worth it. There's always positive takeaways you can kind of implement back into your business from those that pays for more than the travel and the ticket cost of admission.
Yeah. Awesome. I think it's about, acquiring knowledge. I mean, that's what the book has done such a good job at. So that's your top 10 mistakes, Debbie. But I think, Brooke, you've got one more question for Debbie, not in our top 10 mistakes, that I think you need to send her way.
All right, Debbie, go back to when you were 25. So if you could give your 25-year-old self a little bit of advice, what would it be?
I think just in like kind of listening to everything that we've talked about today, I think it would be to don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to pass something up, especially if you don't think it's going to be a great idea. Especially if it's not something you really don't want to do. I have definitely learned from both things, in just vacation rentals and real estate. If it's something, if it's a deal you don't want to do, if it's something you're not comfortable with, if it's a house you don't want to take because whatever reason you don't think you should take it, if it's a relationship you don't think you should invest in with a homeowner or whatever, just do not ever be afraid to say no, because the energy that you'll put into something that isn't productive for you, for if your gut is usually right about those things, right, I think. And so but I think where a lot of time gets wasted is you say, okay, I'll take this house on because whatever, I don't want my competition to get it, or I told my colleague that I would talk to him or whatever, and then you're in a bad relationship, you're wasting time, and like we've said in some of the other comments, one other good house would have made up for that, or two other, houses. So I would say don't be afraid to turn things down, to say no to things that you don't think, that are not going to be good for you.
That's great.
Right on.
Fantastic.
I love that one. Well, awesome. Well, thank you again, Debbie, for your time and recording with us today. If anyone made it this far in the episode, we'll put some links in the show notes. People can check you out on LinkedIn, and they can check out, maybe they need to buy a home in the Eastern Shore, and you could still help them today with that project, it sounds like. But anything else, Brooke? Any parting shots for Debbie before we let her go for today?
I think that's it. Yeah, just thanks for joining us. Thanks for being a friend for so long, and appreciate it. I can't wait to come down to St. Michael's and visit you soon.
All right. I hope you do.